They called you a liar because they feared your silence. But now the silence is speaking, and it brought receipts. You weren't erased, you were preserved. You weren't forgotten, you were sealed. And the very room where they wrote your downfall is now the place truth is standing tall, with names, dates, and trembling confessions in hand. This is not imagination. This is vindication. The whistleblower didn't come out for attention. They came because heaven said, "Enough." When God marks a soul as chosen, no scheme built in shadows can stand in the light. Welcome to Chosen One's Sanctuary. You didn't click on this by accident. You were summoned. Because what's rising now has your name written in the margins. What was buried is being uncovered. What was twisted is being corrected. No weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises in judgment, you shall condemn. That's not a quote. That's law. And today, it's being enforced. You didn't imagine the setup. You didn't exaggerate the betrayal. The evidence is real. And someone from the inside just handed heaven the final piece. Stay. Stay until the end. Because what's being unsealed in this message may explain your entire life, and it may finally confirm what your soul always knew. You were never the problem. You were the proof. Evidence in the shadows. You were always the truth. They said there was no proof, but the proof was never missing. It was hidden, protected, preserved, and now it's walking into the room with light in its hands. The universe never misfiled your case. It simply waited for the appointed hour, and that hour has come. You were never the one on trial. You were the evidence the whole time, the living scroll of truth wrapped in silence, walking among those who prayed you'd never speak. And when you didn't, they mistook your restraint for guilt. But silence is not surrender. It is spiritual strategy. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Isaiah 53:7 wasn't just a prophecy about Jesus. It was a blueprint for the chosen ones, for those accused without cause, yet held by higher law. Your vindication didn't arrive through defense. It arrived through exposure, through the one they never expected, the one they sat beside, planned beside, lied beside. That whistleblower wasn't a leak. They were a lever pulled by heaven, a hand of justice dressed in familiar skin. You weren't silenced. You were sealed. And seals break only when the scroll is ready. They thought you were a secret. You were a sentence. A sentence heaven just released into the atmosphere. The courtroom isn't physical, but you can feel the tension. The walls know what was whispered. The ground remembers who lied. And now the light is crawling across every corner, like fire searching for dry lies to consume. This is not your trial anymore. This is your unveiling, the season of setups. They needed you to look guilty. There was a time they painted you as the villain, not because of what you did, but because of what you reflected. Your presence exposed their performance. Your silence exposed their schemes. And they couldn't handle the contrast. They needed you to look guilty to justify their own deception. So they built a version of you stitched together from fear, fragments, and projections. They handed it to the crowd like a mask and said, "Here, this is who they are." Even Pilate asked the crowd who should be freed, and they screamed for Barabbas, not because he was innocent, but because truth frightened them more than crime ever could. This was never about facts. It was about comfort, and your integrity made them uncomfortable. So they twisted your words, rewrote timelines, staged reactions, and weaponized confusion. And when you didn't break, they spun your stillness into arrogance. You weren't confusing. You were convicting, and conviction always stirs resistance before it births repentance. The setup wasn't messy, it was coordinated. But what they failed to calculate was this. God keeps receipts in realms man can't delete. Heaven logs silence as evidence, tears as testimony, dreams as depositions. And now the case they built against you is collapsing under the weight of truth that won't stay buried. Because what they didn't know is that God appoints a time for everything, including exposure. They covered their lie with noise, but noise is just panic with a microphone. Now the crowd is quiet, and the lie is choking on the attention it begged for. Betrayed, but not broken. The furnace that refined you. They thought betrayal would break you, that being abandoned would erase your worth. But what they didn't know is that betrayal is heaven's furnace, and the chosen are forged in fire, not fear. Joseph stood falsely accused in a foreign land, not because he failed, but because he carried favor. And favor, when misunderstood, always attracts false accusation. He didn't defend himself. He didn't beg for freedom. He let the fire do its work, and when the time was right, the prison door didn't just open. The palace did. You were betrayed, but not broken. Bruised, but not bitter. Silenced, but not erased. You endured not because you were weak, but because you were being tempered. Every silence, every exile, every whisper behind your back was pressure applied by the hand of God, not to destroy you, but to prove what you're made of. You weren't being broken. You were being built in secret, so no man could take credit for what heaven was forming. They cast you aside, thinking you would disappear, but they didn't realize God doesn't discard. He hides, and what is hidden by God always returns with weight. Now your very presence convicts those who once mocked you, not because you came back angry, but because you came back alive. You carry the fire now, not the fire of revenge, the fire of refinement, and they feel it every time you walk into the room they once made hostile. When heaven takes it personally, touch not the chosen. There is a line they crossed, one they couldn't see, one they never thought mattered, but heaven saw it, and heaven remembers. God does not sleep on betrayal, especially when it touches His anointed. When they lied on you, they didn't just harm a person, they interfered with the scroll. David said, "Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm." Psalm 105:15. That wasn't a poetic suggestion. It was a heavenly warning. What they mocked was sacred. What they dismissed was divine. And now the consequences aren't emotional. They're spiritual. Some of them are losing peace they can't explain. Doors are closing without reason. It's not punishment. It's correction. Because when you lie on the chosen, the universe doesn't just grieve. It responds. You didn't need revenge. Heaven already wrote the reply, and it's echoing now. They thought you were an easy target, but what they struck was covered, and covered things don't bleed. They boomerang. You didn't curse them, but the lie did. Now their own words are testifying against them. Their own silence is screaming in rooms they can't control, and every fake smile they wore is cracking beneath the weight of divine accountability. This isn't karma. This is covenant enforcement. The whistleblower, a divine agent of exposure. God always sends someone. When the time is ripe, He touches the one who thought they could carry the lie quietly. And suddenly, the one closest to the crime becomes the trumpet of correction. This is not drama. This is design. The whistleblower was not weak. They were chosen. Chosen to shatter what was never meant to last. Chosen to say what you were forbidden to speak. Chosen to drop the scroll in the center of the room and leave no room for denial. The betrayal needed a witness, and heaven appointed one. Just like Nathan confronted David, just like Mordecai warned Esther, this was heaven using the inside to expose the inside. The same circle that tried to trap you is now the stage where truth is testifying for you. And now the mask is off. The puppeteer is exposed. The group chat turned graveyard. The private joke turned public shame. The one thing they feared most, someone telling the truth, has happened, and you didn't lift a finger. This is not the rise of your voice. This is the rise of your vindication. vindicated without a voice. Your silence was strategic. They mistook your stillness for submission. They thought because you didn't explain you had no explanation, but silence was your shield, and heaven held the sword. You didn't fight because the truth doesn't flinch. You didn't yell because truth doesn't beg for ears, it commands them. Even Jesus, when falsely accused, said nothing, because innocence doesn't require noise, it requires timing. And now, every word they spoke against you is melting in the presence of what they never prepared for: evidence. Your silence wasn't weakness, it was alignment with divine justice. And now it's speaking louder than their entire performance. They can't even look at you without remembering what they did. They thought you'd fall apart, but now you're the only one still standing. They didn't just lose control of the narrative, they lost access to your presence. And that is what haunts them most. The global remnant. You're not alone. You thought you were the only one falsely accused, the only one targeted for being different, the only one stripped down in silence while the crowd clapped for the lie. But you weren't alone. You were early. There are thousands awakening right now, scattered across nations, carrying identical wounds, hearing the same whisper: you were right all along. This is not a coincidence. This is a remnant rising. You are part of the ones who survived the slander, endured the exile, and are now carrying glory that cannot be ignored. This pain wasn't personal. It was patterned. And the moment you realize that, the moment you stop hiding your scars, others begin to find their healing. You are not just a survivor. You are a signal, and the signal is getting louder. Echo activation. Your redemption will be loud. What they tried to bury is now breaking ground, and your name, once whispered with slander, is now rising like incense before the throne. You were never meant to just be healed. You were meant to echo. Your redemption is a ripple in the spirit, and every step you take now shakes what once stood over you. This was never just about proving your innocence. It was about unleashing your assignment. The silence birthed strength. The betrayal birthed boldness. And now, your voice is not a defense, it's a decree. What was once your prison is now your platform, and your scroll has been unsealed. You don't have to prove anything, just walk. Because every step forward echoes backward, breaking chains in places you'll never see. This is the part they didn't see coming. Your rise isn't revenge, it's prophecy fulfilled. Let that echo through every room that ever doubted you. Let that echo through every generation still waiting to hear their name called. Let that echo be your answer. You weren't just wrongly accused, you were prophetically positioned, because sometimes God will let the lie go viral, so the truth can arrive with fire. He allowed them to believe the false report, not to crush you, but to cut the cord between you and every room that couldn't hold your scroll. They thought they were burying you, but the ground they dug was not a grave. It was a womb, and now the contractions of truth have begun. What they called a fall was just the silence before the thunder. You, chosen one, have walked through the wilderness of misunderstanding, the furnace of betrayal, and the courtroom of divine restraint. And you did not fold. You held your peace while the world twisted your name. You stood still while the lie grew legs. You waited, not in weakness, but in warfare. And heaven took note. Let this be your confirmation. It was never about proving your innocence. It was about protecting your inheritance. You have been marked. You have been forged. And now, you are being sent. The rooms that rejected you will now be rearranged by your return. The names that cursed you will now be eclipsed by the one God wrote on your spirit. The silence that once haunted you has become the sanctuary of your authority. So, rise, not in pride, but in clarity, because the scroll in your belly is not yours to keep. It's heaven's decree, and it must echo across generations. Comment 777 if this message confirmed what you already knew in your spirit but didn't have words for until now. Share what part pierced you the deepest, where it touched the ache, where it unlocked the memory, where it whispered your name. If you're ready to stand among the global remnant, not just as a viewer, but as a voice, then subscribe and stay connected to Chosen One's sanctuary. This isn't a channel, it's a vault of confirmations, a vault of prophetic blueprints, and a vault of echoes from those who refuse to die in silence. You are not alone. You are the next echo.